No.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I know that. I remember. You know, I spent a lot of time with that.
I'd rather stand, honestly.
So we're gonna get started in just a minute here.
Yes, work the Windstream. Yes. Yes, we met. We met. Oh my God. Yeah, no, the broad store. I'll never forget that store. But Irv. Oh yeah, Irv. Oh my God, the way we were talking, we found out that we, that we both knew Gene. You know, Gene was my uncle and Irv was a friend of Gene's. Oh yeah. Yes, it is a small world. It is amazing.
Okay, folks, we're gonna get started now if we could.
Yeah, we gotta
That's
do
okay with
it.
everybody.
Yeah. We'll talk.
We can see obviously we're a very close group and we have a lot of catching up to do. So it's a bittersweet occasion that brings us here today. So many good stories, so many nice things to share about Nancy and all the common things that we have been through. But also sadness, we miss her, we miss her in her loss. So we're gathered here today, we're going to see a few of the Psalms, and then we're going to share some words and stories from her life, give some acknowledgments to the people who did a lot for her and made a big difference in her life. We'll start with a selection from the Psalms, the familiar 23rd Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo yksar, B'nai steshech yarbitzeni, al mevinuchos yinachleni, Nafshi yeshoveh v'yancheni v'maglei tzedek l'man shemo, Gam ki elech begitz al mavis lo yirai ra, ki ata imadi, Shiftecha mishantecha hima yenachamoni, Tarach lefanai shulchan neged sayrai, Yishante b'shemen roshi kosi revaya, Achtov v'chesed yirdefuni, Kol yemei chayai, V'shavti b'beis Adonai, la'arech yomim. It's common to say what is called the Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor, which lists the traits of a special woman, and it comes from the book of Proverbs, the book of Mishlei. Eshet Chayil meyimsa, meirachach mipnei michra, batach ba'b'leiv bala, v'shal la'exar. B'malsu tov v'lora, kol yemei chayecha, darsher tzemru fishtim, v'taz v'chapitz kapecha. Haisa kinio socher, mimerchak tavi lachma, v'takem ve'od laila, b'titim teref, leveis v'choik darisecha, zamama sadeh v'tikachechu, mipi kapecha natu kairim. Unfortunately, my book here, the English side fell out, so I don't have a nice translation in English. But the section from Mishlei basically describes the woman of valor. She's a woman of valor and of strength. She spends her time looking out for her household. She making sure that her husband is okay. She uses her practical skills and her abilities to make sure everyone is warm and make sure everything is safe. So it's certainly a very nice praise for the woman of the house, for the mother of the house, the wife of the house, and for someone as dear to us as Nancy. So I wanted to share with you a few words about Nancy's life. So of course she was a very quiet person. She was a very private person. But at the same time, she had this inner spark. She had this inner life, inner joy, inner goodness that I think a lot of people felt and they connected to and wanted to be with her as much as they could. And in particular also, even though she didn't have children, she had her lovely nephews, niece, all of you guys stayed as close as you could and did so much for her to make sure that she was safe and secure. And of course there were many friends from the old neighborhood, from Beechwood, from Cleveland Heights, from school, going far back as Heights High School, going far back as Taylor Elementary School. It's pretty remarkable. It doesn't happen every day that you have a person who lived into their later 80s and has good friends who knew her from almost 80 years ago. So Nancy Sotsky, previously known, her previous maiden name was Glukov. She's aged 87 of Beechwood. She passed away on Tuesday, April 1st. She was born August 19th, 1937. She was the beloved wife of the late Eugene Sotsky, who's right over there, buried. And on his monument, there's a nice picture of some keyboards, which tells you obviously what he used to love and what he did so much of. She's a loving aunt of Ted and Marcia Brilliance, Handel of Culver City, Brian Handel, and Joanne Lazar. And she's a cherished cousin of Mark Zukov of Sarasota, Florida. Her Hebrew name was Nechama Bat Meir. And so, of course, the word Nechama means being comfort or reassurance. So it might have been just a name she was given by her parents, or who knows, maybe it was difficult for her parents to have her, and when she finally came, it brought some comfort and consolation, so they called her Nechama. She was only child to Meir and Celia. Celia is buried right over here. We're going to look for Meir's grave in a little bit to see where he's buried, probably somewhere in the vicinity. So she was their only child, and her parents were very important to her, as we'll soon see. She kept track of the yard site, she kept track of their important days. And she and her mom were a very, very special unit, super, super close. So we know that when her mom died of brain cancer, sometime around when Nancy was 21 years old, in May of 1958, you can imagine what a difficult event that was for Nancy. I'm sure you guys as her friends, will be able to fill in the details, but you can imagine how difficult a loss it was for her. And her father wasn't in the easiest situation. He was now a widower, and he himself was quite a bit older. And I think he was about in his late 50s when he would lose his wife at the time. So Nancy would be left without her mom and a father who was a little bit older in years. And I believe, if I have my numbers right, that he would pass away in 1969, about 10 years later, as a result of a difficult car accident. So a lot of blows and challenges for Nancy. Anyways, she went to Heights High School, and all of her friends said how smart she was. She was a very capable person, math, science, whatever, and I'm sure that explained why she was such a good Maj player. She probably had pretty good strategies that she was able to implement, and I hope she didn't win too much. Or maybe if she didn't win a lot, maybe she gave the games away. She felt bad for you guys. So her good friend over here, Myrna, can tell us, right? So she went from Taylor Elementary to, what junior high was it? Roosevelt Junior High School, and then ultimately to Heights High, right? And then she graduated. We thought it was early because she was so smart, but she actually graduated on time in 1955. And you guys went together to Ohio State, and so she went to Ohio State and she got a BS in education, and she eventually got her teaching certificate, which was so well kept by her archives and then by Ted finding it and putting it all together. And in terms of her work history, she did obviously want to become a teacher, but we don't have such good records about her teaching. Maybe we'll hear more about it a little bit later. We do know she had a few different jobs, including even doing data entry for the Ohio State Lottery, which was something that Ted remembered. And then in college it was there that she met Jean. And, of course it wasn't simple. Marriage is not a simple thing. They had maybe a few more bumps than the usual road, but they were tough people. They toughed it out. They stuck together. And Jean brought the music into the house. He was always doing his gigs. He was always doing his teaching. And it was just kind of an interesting coincidence that in this case, our social worker from hospice, Joan Saley, she was one of Jean's students for physics. She said actually he wasn't so strict. So I don't know if that's universal. That's what she said. Michael Kumin, also the funeral director, had a connection with Jean as well, I believe. So it seems like the stars are aligning in heaven. There's a lot of Jean. As much as Nancy was a quiet person, certain people in her life are being sent to her to make sure that she's okay and feels connected and taken care of. And so Jean did his thing with the music. She had her various jobs and things like that, but she enjoyed being at home, I would say. She enjoyed being at home because that's where she could bake. She loved to bake, and she had some amazing chocolate chip cookies that I think that the nephews and the nieces remember how yummy and tasty they were. And she did her sewing, and she was always very, very good at that. And I think way back when, she used to love animals. She was always an animal lover, and in particular, she loved her cats. And so one of the last duties that Ted took care of was making sure that the 16-year-old cat who can't really hear anymore was safe and sound. And I don't know, are we looking for a home for the cat, or are the cats in good shape?
We have possibilities for places.
Okay. So if you're interested, please let them know after the service. So one of the things that she loved to do was she loved going to the theater, and the family shared that they have a lot of nice memories of going to shows with her, like Les Miserables, if I'm saying it pronouncing it correctly, the one about the French Revolution and all that. I remember when I was a kid in the 80s, we went to see Les Miserables, so I think it's the same thing. And she doesn't expect people to make donations, but I think that's why the suggestion was made. If you did want to make a donation, Playhouse Square would be very appropriate to what she liked. One of the things about Nancy was that she was an excellent neighbor. And so Jeanette's daughter, Mia, was sharing that when she moved to Nancy's block in Beechwood, no one was as nice and kind as Nancy. She went out of her way to welcome the new people, make sure they understood the neighborhood, knew all the rules, knew who it was, and that was her nature, to go out of her way to help people and to take care of people. And I think that Ted and the family were trying to figure out, who does she know? Who has she been keeping track with? Because she's been so quiet. She's such a private person. And all of a sudden, they came across this get well card that came into the apartment sometime in February, and it was signed by all these names. It had all these lovely ladies who were signing it, and he started to put together the puzzle that these were her classmates from Heights High School. And you guys, you said for the last 15 years or so, have met almost monthly and kibitzed and played Maj maybe a little bit and had lunch, and that was something that Nancy would never miss. You know, even though she was quiet, she wasn't a big schmoozer, she never wanted to miss the engagements that you had coming together. And one of you guys would always pick her up and make sure that she was there, that she was happy. And so this was just like so remarkable, I think, to the family to know that she was so quiet, but she had you guys, you know, such a tight group of friends who took care of her and remembered her all these years, which is truly amazing. You know, I've officiated different funerals and I've never seen something like this. You know, such a long-term committed group of friends, you know, in this situation. But anyway, she liked it very, very much, you know, this group and this connection. So we have here in the front row, we have people coming from Illinois, from Montana, from California. You know, so it says a lot, you know, when the nieces and nephews care so much and are so involved as these guys are. But in particular, Ted, you know, I know Ted over the years, when Nancy said, no, I don't want to talk about it, Ted would insist, we do have to talk about it. Sometimes he was successful, sometimes he wasn't, you know, but, you know, you had to do what you could do. And some of the trips were very difficult, you know, Nancy didn't want the help and you knew she needed it. But in particular, this last week, I think Ted came out thinking he would just kind of check on her and see what was going on, some of the new health hiccups that she was experiencing. But we all didn't realize that it would change so quickly, you know, that she would so quickly go to her home, which seemed like her dream to be with our cats, and you know, we were hoping she could kind of just slowly, you know, be there and the time would come. But instead, that wasn't the plan. You know, she seemed to get this complication and that complication, this complication, and ultimately she had to be moved from her apartment to the inpatient, you know, section of the hospice. But that was good in a way because they got her comfortable, they got her safe. And the family didn't have to worry about the caregiving stuff. They could just worry about just being with Nancy. So I know in her last moments, you know, that was what she was thinking about. Who's going to take care of me? Am I going to be okay? But it's so nice that she had Ted, she had the family, and she had a lot of hospice people like Bree, I'll mention Bree, you know, who really reassured her that I know you're a little nervous about what's going on, you know, especially about your pain, but we're going to make sure that it's okay. So we're going to make sure that it's not difficult. And, you know, thank God, I believe that everything worked out for the best. So I don't know if we have Kate here. Do we have Kate? Oh, you're Kate. I'm sorry. So Kate is a very special person we want to mention. So maybe you came into her life as a cat sitter, but you eventually became a Nancy sitter. You know, so I assume you have training in taking care of cats, but people was a new skill for you. But it's just remarkable because you were there at the right time, at the right moment, and that when Nancy needed more than help with her animals, you know, you worked with the family. Gave her that stability and that surety and made sure everything was okay. So, you know, the family really wanted me to mention you and to say a very, very heartfelt thank you to Kate for what you did these years. So overall, you know, there's, you know, with Nancy, I think I can see her here saying to me, Rabbi, enough is enough already. You know, you don't have to tell all the stories. You don't have to keep talking. You know, I'd rather have a little more quiet than anything. So, out of respect for Nancy and her want to be quiet, you know, I think we will leave with this. But we just want to thank her for being a kind, caring, nice person. You know, it's not about the words that you say. It's not about the jabbering that you do. It's just about what you are in your heart. And I think to many people, she was a beloved aunt, a beloved friend, and we knew that she loved us. And we knew she cared for us very much, even though she didn't necessarily have the, you know, the nature and the ability to say it. So now her and Jean will be buried together, in that area. And so Jean has the keyboard, so we have to figure out what are we going to put on Nancy's stone. You know, what will be her icon? You know, maybe it will be a cat. You know, maybe it'll be, you know, some Shabbos candles. You know, that's something that we can figure out.
Chocolate chip cookie.
Sewing machine. Okay, so we'll leave it up to you. You know, in this world, we can be creative. I've seen people write puzzles on the back of their stones. They've written recipes. You know, so one thing about her is that her nieces and nephews are not boring people. So I'm sure they will come up with something interesting, creative. So we complete the service. You know, it's on a nice spring day. You know, we have some hope after some cold weather. You know, Nancy would want us to not be too sad, not to be too worried. You know, just to go on and to smile and to remember her. You know, with good memories. And you know, go into the spring. And next week we have the Passover. You know, a very important holiday for the Jewish people, a holiday of liberation, a holiday of freedom, and a holiday of family. So as we go into Passover, we will definitely remember Nancy, you know, or remember her memory for this family. Thanks for this opportunity to share with me, and we should all have good things and be blessed with good things, in this world. So at this time now, we're going to move to the next phase, which is not just honoring Nancy with the words and the stories, but to actually help with the physical preparations. And as we know in Jewish tradition, it's a mitzvah to be involved in the burial. The shovelful that we put on is not easy, but it's a symbol of our love and our caring. And we would like her to be surrounded in the earth, in the dirt, that we, the people who love her and care for her, put there so carefully. So if you now would please rise, and we're going to lower the casket and then place some of the earth on top.
Whoa, it's right.
It kind of moves in.
Can you help me?
Okay, I got it. If you stand up for one,
Hold on.
All right, so go over to the casket a little bit. All right. We'll have you guys put them all over. You're going that way, right? Time to beat it down. We'll put on 2 shovels, and we'll put the cover on, and then everyone else will sit there. Very well.
Please watch your step.
Slippers. Alright, so place the vault cover on now, and then everyone has an opportunity right after that.
Hold on 1 second, we're going to put the cap on. We're going to put the cap on.
Put the cover on.
Are all people buried in the vault?
This cemetery is required.
Yeah,
Not every cemetery requires it, but most of them in the arrangement do. So that's well, the rabbis believe this is because they think the vault will be the same way.
so interesting. I've never seen that.
These are the country music.
With latch? There's no latch.
No, there's no latch. It's a tongue and groove, so it seats itself and that's it. There are some families that do make concrete vaults that have a line because they make it waterproof. Why? But some people, that thought is important to them. That's why they do it.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
If you go to west side of Cleveland, has a Chalema Cemetery. There's no vaults there.
No vaults?
They're not forbidden. Nobody ever
What
uses
about
them.
Mount Olive?
Mount Olive requires vaults. The only dispensation is there are some graves that were so, because over the years